Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's grade 12 literature study program in English 5. My name is Karabo Side. This lesson is brought to you by Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Sci-Bono Discovery Center and broadcast by Pagama Research and Development. With literature, the key component of literature is time management. What do we expect you to do? We expect you to read the genre that is prescribed at school, and we want you to read intensively. First, you read it for enjoyment, and secondly, you read it with impact and analysis. And as you're doing your reading, your daily reading, invest time to think, and we will be asking you to think. Your teachers will be asking you to read and think and to write a lot. In that way, you will be able to master the literature set works. We need you to keep the following in mind. Literature study consists of 4 genres. We have Section A, novels, for 35 marks. Section B, drama, for 35 marks. Section C, short stories, for 35 marks. And lastly, poetry, for 35 marks. All these 4 genres have common things that we need to do. Firstly is the setting. Even if you study a novel, a drama, and short stories, and sometimes even in some poems, you will find setting where the story takes place. And there's a key component in the genres: narrator. The narrator is the person who will be telling us the story. We also have what we call a plot. A plot is the storyline, what the story is all about. So in the novel, in your drama, in your short stories, you learn what the story is all about, and followed by who are the characters in that story. There is also a central theme or main idea of your novel or your drama and your story, your short story. What you will also learn this year is the use of figurative language. I know most learners are familiar with the common figurative language, your simile and your metaphor. But you will be learning much more of other figures of speech and the use of figurative language. Importantly, when a writer pens a novel or a drama, they have an idea, a conflict that we are going to follow that is prescribed in the genre. We're also going to learn about the tone, a tone of the whole story, and a tone given forth by characters. There is what we call a checklist or a choice when you do the 4 genres. I've spoken about your section A, B, C, and D. What is important is at your school, your teacher is going to select 2 from the 4 that you are going to study this year, and at the end of the year, you are going to choose those very 2 genres. We also have what we call a table of contents that you find in the literature paper. Let me share with you the genres or the titles of the books that we are going to study in this year 2022. We have 2 novels. The novels are Cry the Beloved Country and A Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You are not supposed to do the 2 novels. Your school must choose one if a novel is prescribed. Even at the end of the year when you write, you're only going to write on one. Section B is drama. Section B, drama, also there are 2 prescribed dramas. That is Macbeth and My Children, My Africa. If your school chooses to do a drama, you are not supposed to do Macbeth and My Children, but a choice of one. And as early as now, remember the question number. So if you do My Children, My Africa in your head all the time, you must remember that you are doing question 4. Even at the end of the year when you're going to write, you're writing question 4. If it's Cry the Beloved Country, you are doing question 1. Short stories. There are 8 prescribed short stories that you have to learn in 2022. But the examiners are not going to set off on all the 8 stories, but they are going to set only on 2. But you have to study all the 8. In your exam, we're going to have short story title number 1 and short story title number 2. So short stories are question number 5. The last question is poetry. 10 poems are prescribed. Only 2 are set on. So you have to learn all the 10. And then at the end, you are going to write only on 2. You study the 2 literary genres chosen by your school or your teacher. When you're going to be writing your prelim exam as well as your end of the year exam, and even at some point your teacher is going to give you extracts or practice in class, your teacher is going to give you what we call extracts. And what is an extract? An extract is 200 to 220 words from a particular book. If it's book 1, if it's Cry the Beloved Country, it's going to be either book 1 or book 2 or book 3. And what is happening when you get that? It is going to mention that you are doing extract A. You read that extract. What else do we do when we get an extract? You place the extract in context. Where and what has happened? And where is this extract found? From chapter 1 of book 1 of Cry the Beloved Country. At the beginning of the extract, a clue is given to the extract. In this extract, what is happening? The Carisbrook area in Natal. So the author here is explaining or giving us what the landscape of the area is. So the author is giving or is laying foundation of what the book is all about. If it is My Children, My Africa, the first extract in the book is what? The Great Debate. So as we proceed, or as you use this presentation at your own time, what do you need to do? You need to take this and apply it on the particular book that you study at school. What do we have on our menu? We have a novel. And what is a novel? A novel is made up of a series of events that develop as the story is told. Then we have a drama. What is a drama? A drama is supposed to be acted. It's a play. But now the play is put on a page to stage. So we can only imagine what was supposed to be acted in Macbeth, in My Children, My Africa. Short stories. In a novel, we have a build-up of one character who is the main character, but there are other minor characters and main characters that are in play. But with a short story, we normally have one major conflict and then one major character that the story is built on or built upon. In poetry, we have a selection of poems which has a shape and structure, sound and imagery. We are going to approach literature or a text like an iceberg. Normally an iceberg is found where? In an ocean. Where in an ocean? You know a mountain as a mountain, isn't it? People in Gauteng, we have lots and lots of mountains. But people who are in the coastal areas, they know a lot about the sea and they know a lot about the ocean. So, an iceberg is like a mountain which is found where? In the water or in the sea or in the ocean. Because there are vast amount of water surrounding that iceberg, the bottom part will be found in the water. We will only see this top part. And what is the top part? It is your level 1. And level 1 and level 2. These are ideas that you read, is the knowledge that you find in a particular extract, and you are required to have 14 marks to master your level 1 and your level 2 questions. And when you go forward, we say you have what we call level 3 inference questions. And they are just in the middle of your iceberg. Lastly, you have level 4 and level 5 with 7 marks, that is at the bottom. We are normally afraid of the level 4 and 5 questions. We think they are very difficult. But as an English learner, an English file learner, or a literature learner, what do? Another skill that we're offering you, that your teachers will be teaching you, is critical thinking. It is at this point of level 4 and 5 where you now need to apply critical thinking. we ask you of your opinion. What do you think? What is your opinion? And it can be difficult, isn't it? We are going now to deal with the first reading of the text, the level 1 questions. They are to do with what? The setting, the narrator, characters, conflict, and plot. We say these are easy questions or knowledge questions. And as you study your literature, remember also, because you are studying literature for exam, do not forget to enjoy the stories that you'll be reading. When you have studied your knowledge, the book, and you have knowledge of the book, you will be able to answer the giveaway questions or the must get questions. You will be required, or in the progress of the year, you will be asked to handle such questions. Choose a description from column B, and they will give you 5 options that matches or fits with column A, which have 4 options. And can you see in column A, we have characters: Margaret Jarvis, Mrs. Ditebe, Esther, and Gertrude. You will only know about these people when you do what? When you read your story and you know it. So these ones are going to be easy for you because you shall have read. It tests the knowledge from the rest of the novel. And again, do not read about the minor characters. We only not testing major characters or the main characters, but also the minor characters. Who is telling the story? A narrator has a point of view about events and ideas in the story. It can be the first person or the internal narrator or the third person narrator. If it is the first person who is narrating the story, the story is told by one of the characters, and the person is subjective, and they will normally present a slanted view from their point of view as the first person. I feel, and this is how and that will be that person now and again talking to us. In the third person, it will be this person that we do not know. It is someone whose identity cannot be established, and we have a more objective view. The person or the character will give us, or the narrator will give us a bird's eye view of what is happening in the book. Plot. It's a story or it's a narrative of events arranged in sequence. We call this freight tech. Where the story starts, it's an exposition. And as the story rises, the conflict intensifies. We have a rising action. The story develops. And at this point, at the peak now, we have a climax where the tension has built up. And then what happens after the tension is at the peak? Then we have a falling action. The conflict now decreases. And as the conflict decreases, we have a denouement here, which now signals the end of the story. As you study your literature this year, you will be familiar with all these aspects or criteria that I have listed. Okay. Let us look at the storyline as given in our books. We have Cry the Beloved Country there. What is Cry the Beloved Country all about? It tells us a story about a father who moves from rural KZN and goes to Johannesburg in search of his son as well as his sister. Our next novel is A Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Can you see that green one? It's a narrative about the complexities of science and the duplicity of human nature. We have our Dr. Jekyll changing or transforming himself into Mr. Hyde. So we see the science coming into play. That's your strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. There we see a man holding up raising up his arm. That's it's my children, my Africa. It is the story about a teacher who has invested all his dreams on his young protege or young learner called Tammy. You will enjoy this story also. Those who loves science fiction will enjoy Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We also have another poem, another drama, Macbeth, the famous Shakespeare drama. Macbeth meets the witches, and what happens? They promise him to become a king. And he waits. He doesn't want to wait to become a king. He wants to kill. And to get power, he feels that this is the right way to go. So that is the plot of Macbeth. We have short stories. In the short stories called Changes, some of the short stories are sad, some are amusing, sometimes we feel triumphant, and they all speak with a human voice. Lastly, we have poetry, Voice of the Land. We have a collection of poems. All are very rich, and they range from poems from places and times, and they are all from established poets. When you start with any genre that you are going to read, the first thing that comes to mind is the setting. And what is the setting? It is the physical setting of a story, or where the story is actually taking place. Setting doesn't only talk about the physical place, but it is also taking into consideration the time. It refers also to time. So we answer two questions on setting: the where and the when. Where and what has happened. That is your time and place. That is the when for time and place where. Very important. I'm going to give you examples of setting in different genres. Let's see Cry the Beloved Country. In Cry the Beloved Country, chapter 1, it takes place where? In the village of Ikopo, to Carisbrook in Natal. And what has happened in this chapter 1? When the narrator is describing the terrain or the landscape, talking about the rivers and the mountains, and how humans or people are connected with the landscape and the land. which is also a very important theme in Cry the Beloved Country. You can also look at the title of the story, Country. So it is very imperative that we mention the landscape. In the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the first chapter, what do you read in the first chapter? It takes place where? In a street where Mr. Utterson and Enfield meet. What do? What is happening there? They are taking their regular Sunday stroll and they have a conversation. Coming to the dramas, checking on setting, we have My Children, My Africa, Act 1, Scene 1. Where does it take place, that chapter 1, that Act 1, Scene 1? In a classroom at Zolile High School. During when? During the great debate between the Kamdebu and Zolile High School learners. People are excited. I hope you also engage in debates at school. Lastly, we have the setting of Macbeth. Where does it take place? It takes place in the castle. In Act 1, Scene 1, it takes place not in the castle, but it takes place in a field, in a heath, where the witches meet. And what do? They tell us about Macbeth going to become a king, and they also talk about Macduff's children going to be the King of Scotland. Characterization. We want to know, who are these people? How do the characters become real? We have indirect characterization and we also have direct characterization. How do we know about characters? We check their actions, how they act, and we also check how they interact with other people or other characters, and also how they appear, their appearance, their words also, or dialogue, their thoughts, what they think and what they feel will tell us about indirect or direct characterization. What other people are saying about them, that will be indirect. What they say about themselves and how they behave, that will be your direct characterization. Right. The physical description of a person. The most common way of describing a character, you identify anything physical about the character. How Dr. Jekyll looks and how Mr. Hyde looks. Remember, we're reading there about the transformation of the two characters. That will include your height, your skin, your hair, and eye color. Short or tall, skin or fat, how she walks and how they stand. That will be the physical characterization. Dialogue. What is the character saying to us? Remember, we said we also determine character through what the people say, their words. A dialogue is how they talk. What are they saying? Dialogue includes the character's choice of words and syntax. Are they rough? Are they kind? It will depend on what they are saying. It also includes the tone. How do they say these words? And from then, we can determine who they are. Even us, isn't it? The way I speak to you, or the way you speak to your friends, then people will be able to say you look like, oh, she is kind, or she is harsh, or she is rude, depending on what words you say and the tone you use. Thoughts. The narrator can give the reader insight in the inner thoughts and feelings of a character. The thoughts of a character can only be analyzed if we are inside the head of the character. Never assume what a character is thinking. Look at the words given on your novel, on your drama, and your short story, and you will know what they think. How we describe a character, we call it character trait or character traits. We use these nice words: cheerful for nice, caring, charming, pleasant, polite, depending on what the person is saying. And if you evil, people will say that person is mean or greedy or very impatient. We all know that sometimes our vocabulary is very limited, and we are only limited to a few words like nice, mean, sad, confident. But I want to encourage you, learners, that in this year, start learning different words or ways of saying nice or sad. It's not going to be sad. It will depend. I feel so lonely today. I am depressed. And if you're confident, you'll be, oh, she is assertive. She's fearless. And she's such an independent girl. If you are shy, people will say, oh, when she stands in the class, she's very nervous and uneasy and unsure. So go out, be brave, and use. I want you to be brave, to be courageous, bold, and daring, and embrace all the new words in 2022. Attitude of a character is how the character feels about what is happening to him or her in the story. Think how you would describe your attitude if you were in a similar situation. You think of various situations. Let's think about the learners that are awaiting their matric results tomorrow. What are they doing as we speak? Are they carefree this morning? Their attitude will determine how they are. If you were in a similar position, what would be happening to you today, now, this afternoon? You'd probably be asleep, isn't it? Or you'd be excited and looking forward to your results tomorrow morning. It will depend. Let us look at examples of a state of mind of a character. In My Children, My Africa, in the first chapter, or Act 1, Scene 1, we read this words: Tammy stands up. As he stands up, there is an applause. People are applauding him. Remember, it's a great debate. They are applauding, and he looks at the house, and what do we see? He's enjoying the moment. He is courageous, and he's enjoying the moment because people are applauding him. So what do we say? A state of mind is the personal, emotional state. The question that you have to ask yourself, remember, you are not in the exam as yet, but as you proceed reading, I would like you to learn or to pose questions to yourself. What do these lines tell us about the state of mind of Tammy? And then we substantiate your answer. To substantiate is to give evidence to what you are saying or what your answer is. Tammy is at ease. He is confident. He's determined. Why is he like that? He is confident that he's going to win the debate, regardless of his outrageous statement. He made some outrageous statements there, saying women's place. In short, he says women's place is in the kitchen. So women's are the inferior people. The applause from his schoolmates gives him a false sense of achievement. He says, I've nailed the debate today. So as you read, kindly, please make sure that you make value judgments, you ask yourself questions, and you answer those questions. Don't just read for enjoyment. Read for enjoyment, read for the knowledge, and then get into grips with what? With analysis of the literature. Reactions of other people. Tammy's state of mind, he is telling us about himself, or we can see how he thinks. But then there are also other people who will be doing what? They will be looking at Tammy or any other character, and then they will give us insight of what they think of him, or their reactions would include what? Responses and physical or emotional treatment. Okay? Lastly, we have a summary of characterization. What are you going to learn this year? The physical description of her character, the dialogue, meaning the words that they are going to say, the attitude, what they think or what they say, actions, what are they doing, thoughts, what is in their mind, and reactions of others, that is, what other people are saying about them. So check on this as you read your novel or your drama or your short story. Check on the following items or criteria that we used for characterization. Let me give you now examples of character questions. A character trait in My Children, My Africa. Please, I'm using My Children, My Africa, but I would like you to use your other genres, how this fits in with your particular set work. Mr. M says, "Come to order." And then he grabs the school bell and rings it violently. It works. There's silence. What does this extract reveal about the character of Mr. M? Substantiate your answer. Mr. M, remember what he said? Let's look at the words. Come to order. It is in a class, isn't it? Learners are making noise, they are applauding, they are screaming, some perhaps are beating the desks. You know the excitement that you usually have in class when we debate, isn't it? Then Mr. M is firm, he's assertive, he instructs, he commands the learners to be silent, and then he reminds the learners on how to carry themselves during a debate. So we have used character traits there. He is firm, he's assertive. And we have given evidence from the book. He instructs or commands the learners to be silent. during a debate. So you have your character trait as well as an example. Reactions to other people. Again, in My Children, My Africa, what happens there? They ask you, state one difference in the reaction of Tammy and Isabel to how women are supposed to be treated in the great debate. But look at the question closely. State one difference in reaction of Tammy and Isabel to how women are supposed to be treated. Tammy is patriarchal, he's dismissive, and sees women as inferior and submissive. While Isabel is probing, she's direct, she's sarcastic, she tells Tammy, you have outdated thinking. Your ideas belong to the long stone age. You are not moving with the times. So we state two facts in that. So that is the reaction that we see or that we give when we read or analyze what Tammy and Isabel are doing in the play. Again, in My Children, My Africa, we are going to state one difference in the attitude of Tammy and Isabel versus Mr. M in this extract. Remember what Mr. M said? Come to order. And then unfortunately, we did not get the time, or we don't have the time to read from the extract, but you must read that. Tammy and Isabel are excited. They are fiery. They are determined. They are all, if you go to page 1 or Act 1, Scene 1, you'll see the first opening scene there. They are all shooting. No, you said, and I said. Yes, you said women are, and they interrupt each other. So Mr. M is firm, he's anxious, he's perplexed, he's telling his learners, no, we don't debate like this. You need to give each other a chance. Fiery. There's a heated debate going on there. So we have the difference there of the characters, how they behave. Tammy and Isabel behaves the same. They are both excited, but Mr. M doesn't want to have any of this excitement. He wants order. We have a conflict. What is conflict? Every character should want something, even if it is only a glass of water. Who said that? Kurt Vonnegut, a writer. Every person, you can fight for a glass of water. If you want it, you want it, isn't it? You will state your point. If I say, no, it is not time to drink water, you will certainly push forward and say, I demand, I want my water. This is the time that I will get water. So conflict has different ways of putting itself forward. We have external conflict and internal conflict. We have a conflict where it is man and man, man versus nature, man and society, and man and self. Let us check what happens when men versus men. The character struggles against an antagonist. What is an antagonist? An antagonist is an opponent. The character has an issue. Both have a disagreement or a problem with one another or another character in the story, and they don't see eye to eye. And then what do they want to do? They want to try and solve a problem. Men versus men. The example here, Mr. M and Tammy always, they have a conflict. And what is their conflict all about? Tammy sees education as oppressive and he wants freedom now. While on the other hand, Mr. M believes that education is the only key to freedom. So they don't see eye to eye. There's also man versus nature. This is apparent where? This is apparent when a character struggles with external forces. This is evident in strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll uses potions to alter the natural course of nature. And then at the end, there are dire consequences. He cannot handle. He wants to go back to what he is. But Mr. Hyde has taken control of him. We have men, another conflict, men versus society, that is external forces. There's a struggle against society. There are rules, isn't it? Laws and cultural values, traditions, politics, or groups of people. We as a society, there are things that we believe in. In Cry the Beloved Country, what happens there? We have Absalom, who fights the justice system. He's killed a man, isn't it? Now he must stand trial. So at the end, what happens? Society conflict is resolved when Absalom is hanged. So it is man versus society. What happens when it is man versus self? You struggle between an idea. Should I or shouldn't I? This is evident. We call it internal conflict. This is evident in Macbeth. Macbeth was told that he's going to be king. And what happens to Macbeth? He is undecided. Do I have to kill King Duncan, or should I wait for my time to become king? But at the end, he kills King Duncan and he sees power and he becomes the king. And that's not the end of his trouble. You will read on about that. Reading on a deeper level. Remember, the first level that we did was level 1. And it was mostly knowledge. You also have to know what we call figurative language and the tone. So we are moving with our iceberg, getting into the water now. With figures of speech, learners, we have our simile, our metaphor, personification, alteration, onomatopoeia, hyperbole, and idioms. And what are figures of speech used to? We use the figures of speech to compare, to contrast, that is, we give opposites, we exaggerate, and we create understatements. And we also use figures of speech to do what? To recreate sounds. The figures of speech that has to do with comparison, we have your simile, your metaphor, and personification. How do we identify those? We use ID, or is initialism, to help you remember the steps to explain a figure of speech in context of the extract. Now you are going to read very closely. The I stands for what? You identify the figure of speech. The D in ID, you describe the two things being compared. And when you describe those things that you compare, please be specific. The E is you explain why the poet or the author has made the comparison. Learners, do not wait to find this in the exam or in your test. As you read and analyze, after you have read a chapter or a scene, please check for yourself. Can I identify a simile in this extract or in this chapter or in the poem that I have read. It should be your daily routine. And if you invest in this exercise, at the end of the year, it's going to be really very easy. You're going to get top marks. For us, in the exam, we're going to ask you to identify, we give you 1 mark. And when we want you to explain, we give you how many marks? 2. So you must be really, you describe the 2 things that are being compared first, and then you explain why the comparison has been made. So I want you to invest time. Let's look at Village People, our short story. Poverty has a home in Africa like a quiet second skin. What is this? It's a simile. How do we know that it is a simile? The use of like. What is being compared with a D there? The poverty is compared to what? To a peasant's second skin. Explanation? You see, we've been very specific here. Poverty, do you see poverty there? Is compared to what? To a second skin. We see the comparison there. How do you explain it? Poverty is part of Africa, like a second skin is a part of a person. How many marks do you get? You get your 1 mark for your simile, and you get your 2 marks, 1 for your comparing, and then you giving us the 2 things, and then for giving the explanation. Can you see now? It's 1 plus 1, so it's 2 marks, and that one is a stand-alone one. Practice, practice, practice. Furthermore, let's look at this one. In My Children, My Africa, I have got a zoo in here. A mad zoo of hungry animals. And the keeper is frightened. Who's saying this? Is Mr. M. In My Children, My Africa. He has a zoo in his heart. Identify the figure of speech there. It's a metaphor. You describe Mr. M compares his heart to what? To a wild zoo of hungry animals. Why is the author, why is the playwright doing or giving that explanation or that figure of speech? It shows how he feels in his heart about losing grip of his learners, on his learners who want to join the boycotts. Remember the firm, strict Mr. M. He's ringing the bell, and he wants learners to come to school. And where are they? Nowhere to be found. So he is disappointed. He's standing there and he's saying, I've got a zoo in here. A mad zoo of hungry animals. So he's comparing his learners to what? To a zoo of hungry animals. So again, 1 and 1 and 1. In the new tribe, our short story, the room was frozen into silence. The new tribe, it's when the room was frozen into silence. Can a room freeze into silence? No. Who is always silent? A human being. So what are they doing here? They are comparing the room to a person, or they are giving the room human qualities who has fallen silent. The people in the room are silent to emphasize the shock that the Arlingtons feel. I'm sure it's the beginning of the story where the Arlington received a baby. Okay? The baby that was found or was brought by the milkman. We have irony and sarcasm. Those are opposites. These are figurative language that indicates or gives us an opposite. Irony, an event in which what is on the surface appears to be the case or to be expected, differs radically from what is actually the case. So it's when somebody says something but actually means something else. If you come late to class and when you open the door and comes in and your teacher say, "Oh, welcome, early bird." What is your teacher actually saying? He's saying, it will sound as if he says you early, but he's being sarcastic or ironic because you have come late. We always have that but or yet. Remember when you do your irony, when we ask you of irony, use the word but, yet, to indicate that you understand that opposite. In this example, in Macbeth, the King Duncan, looks at the castle and says, "This castle has a pleasant seat. The air is nimbly and sweetly recommends itself unto our gentle senses." The king comments on this beautiful place, and castle, but he doesn't know at the end that he was going to be murdered there. But he does not know. Can you hear me? But he does not know that he's going to be killed or murdered there. When we exaggerate or there are understatements, we call this hyperbole for exaggeration, for emphasis. We emphasize euphemism, hyperbole. I'll give you examples further. Euphemism, understatement. When you refer to something unpleasant in a deliberate, pleasant way. An example of a hyperbole. I was coming home from some place at the end of the world. That is in the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You're coming home, but where have you been? At the end of the world. Can you reach the end of the world? No, we can't see the end of the world. So what is he saying here? It is exaggerating to emphasize he came from a place very far away. Then we have a figurative language that has to do with sounds, onomatopoeia, alliteration, and assonance. Normally these we find in poetry. They are most evident in poetry. They indicate which sounds are repeated for emphasis. In the sonnet, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" line 7. Fair from fair. What is that? It is alliteration. Fair from fair. Why do we have that alliteration? The emphasizing that the beauty of everything beautiful actually does what? Fades eventually. Onomatopoeia. You use words to recreate the sounds they describe. In the poem Spring, through the echoing timber, thus so rings and ring. The echo Echo is a sound, isn't it? Ring. When you ring and ring something, you can see actually the sound there. Example of sounds: alliteration, a 4-foot box, a foot for every year, where in midterm break. Assonance: when, wills in wills. Do you see the emphasis on the we, the W's and the E, we's, the assonance there? With the alliteration is the F sound there. Onomatopoeia: while I listen to the buzzing of flies. Buzz. When you buzz, can you hear me when I say buzz and z in captive? So it's the using of words to recreate the sounds. Tone. It is very important that you know the tone of voice used, and we identify or we explain the tone as what you say. That it is not about what you say, but how you say it. It is very important when you say certain things, you check how you say it, not about what you say, and it makes a lot of impact. And in literature, we are, as students of literature, we are going to be asked to check what people are saying and how they say it. It is the attitude or emotion that someone has in their voice. Tone of voice show how the speaker feels about something. It refers to the author's feeling towards the subject or towards something. You will know what the author is implying by the words he uses. And that indicates on what? That it reflects or refers to the mood. What is the mood? Your tone creates the mood. Refers to the feeling or the atmosphere the author is describing. It's what the author makes you feel when you read this writing. You can read a sentence and feel sad or happy or angry. When I read Cry the Beloved Country, in most instances, I cry. I end up crying. I cry a lot. When I go and read grade 11 set work, I'm not talking about that now. I cry also. So it is the mood that is created. When Mr. M rings the bell and Tammy says to him, don't go out, Mr. M, they are going to kill you. And he takes his bag and rings it, and the mob comes and they kill him. What do? Do you sit there and say, Mr. M is killed? No, you are sad. And that's the mood that the author left you in. How to recognize tone in a text? A writer will use subtle ways to express his or her thoughts in the feelings of a speaker, narrator, or a character. We use diction. We call it diction. Diction, the choice of words. And point of view. What is the writer's view or how that affects him? Syntax, the words arranged together that create a sentence, also gives us a tone. The formality, how formal or informal the text is. Remember at the beginning of Act 1, Scene 1, Macbeth, oh, hail Macbeth, oh, King of Scotland, Thane of Cawdor. So they're giving him a beautiful words, and that tone used by the witches It leaves us cold and fearful, isn't it? Tone changes. We recognize the differences in tone. Know how the attitude of the speaker changes. When you read Macbeth, you'll see the changes that is happening there. Macbeth charges at the witches and wants to know, why are you saying that I'm the Thane of Cawdor? Because he's alive. And at the end, we see him doing the asides and talking, what is this going to be? And now he's thinking of himself as a king, as a future king. So we recognize the changes there. Example, we're going to ask you to describe a tone of voice in a particular extract or line. And the words that we use, normally we use the happy, the sad, the mad, the surprised. Like I said earlier with the character traits, we use the normal words. When I'm happy, what am I? In other words, merry, ecstatic, cheerful. When I'm sad, I'm depressed. I'm miserable and pessimistic. And when I'm mad now, angry, bitter, frustrated, surprised, curious, okay, astonished. So we would like to challenge you to be curious and go experiment with different tone words that your teacher will give you. Be inquisitive, right, learners? Refer to line 9. So he prayed. This is an example found in Cry the Beloved Country. So he prayed briefly. Into thy hands, O God, I commend Ndocheni. What tone would Stephen Khumalo use in this line? Why would Stephen Khumalo use this tone in this line? He is depressed, he's in despair, he's anxious. Why is he doing that? He is depressed that Ndocheni is in trouble when he sees children dying of hunger. Stage directions are only applicable to drama. Remember, drama was supposed to be acted, but now we have put it on the page. What is stage direction? What should the character do when saying these words? Example, in My Children, My Africa. In line 2, Tammy says, the people. If you were the director of the play, what would you tell Tammy to do when saying these lines? And you must state 2 points. Tammy would stamp his feet, beat his chest with his hand, raise his fist in the air and say, the people. In Macbeth, same stage direction. He had none. His flight was madness. When our actions do not, our fears do make us traitors. In line 3 to 5, Lady Macduff says, he had none. His flight was madness. When our actions do not, our fears do make us traitors. If you were the director of the play, what would you tell Lady Macduff to do when saying these lines? The husband has run away, isn't it? What should she do? Shake her head. Point her finger at Ross and say, my husband leaving us was just pure madness. He must wave her hands wildly in the air and say, what shall I do now? When our actions do not, our fears do make us traitors. Whether he was afraid. If he was afraid, it makes him a traitor. I don't know.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, finally it's my turn, and I'm going to take you through the deeper level. We're now really reaching the bottom of the iceberg. So in that deeper level, we have level 3 questions. That's the theme question. And we have our level 4 and 5 questions, which will be your own opinion questions. Now, an easy way for you to remember what does theme mean is to write the message, and then can you see there the first the and the ME makes theme. So that's just a way for you to remember what's the meaning of theme. It is the message. So it's the underlying message or the big idea. It's the general thing that the author wanted to achieve in the book or the drama. What critical belief about life does the author want to convey? Remember, authors don't just write stories because they think, maybe I need a little bit of money, maybe I must write a book. They have an idea, they are inspired. They often talk about the muse. Something inspires them and they want to share that love or that idea with you. So why does it matter? Because it's important for you to understand the reason behind his thinking. When you are asked to talk about the theme, it's better expressed in a statement rather than one word. So don't try to encapsulate it in one word only. You will have to explain it a bit. That's why it's a level 3 question, because it's where you have to think. You must make inference. You must make it your own. So how do you figure out the theme? First of all, look at the conflict. Karabo told you that in every genre that we do, there will be conflict. What causes the struggle? Who are fighting against each other? Look at the dialogue. What do the people talk about? What do they talk about behind the back of the main character, maybe? Study the characters. How do they change? Do they change at all? What is often mentioned? Because there will be if there's a theme, it will be mentioned more than once during the book or the novel. What is described in detail? So when we go to the message, it's the main subject that's being discussed or described in a piece of writing. The question will be in the exam, discuss a given theme. They will give you the theme in relation to either the passage or the book or the drama as a whole. Now, how should we answer questions, these questions that are at level 3 and 4 and 5? We call them thinking questions because the answers aren't obvious. Remember the Peel method? We've spoken about the Peel method. It is a guideline, especially for you to understand what is being said. P is for point. When you think about the theme, think about the point you want to make. Try to find an example. That's what the 1E means. The second E is that you must explain the example, because obviously the person who must read your answer doesn't necessarily understand what it is. And this will help you also to understand your example. And then it must be linked again to the point or the question. So please remember this little, it's not an acronym, it's more an initialism to help you remember. I call it the donkey bridge because when I've struggled to remember something, I make little notes for myself like this, just so that I remember something easily. Now let's look at a few examples of themes. One of the themes in Cry the Beloved Country is education. Discuss this theme. Now they can either say discuss this theme in relation to Mr. M or to Tommy or to Isabel and Tommy. Sorry, this is in Cry the Beloved Country. The theme, it shouldn't have been education. It should have been compassion. Then we give examples. Stephen Kumalo shows compassion. You see, there's the point towards the Jarvis family after his son murders Arthur. Or Mr. Miss Mango shows compassion towards Stephen, and we give an example by assisting him in Johannesburg. Or James shows compassion towards the Kumalus by blaming them for Arthur's death. Mrs. Letebi shows compassion when she accommodates Stephen and his family. And there you have explained the theme of compassion in Cry the Beloved Country, because you have given examples and you have explained it and you've linked it to the theme. In My Children, My Africa, one of the themes is violence. Discuss how this is relevant to Tommy and Mr. M. And then you must go follow the same pattern when you explain that. Let's look at it. You should include the following points. Tommy sees violence as a way to fight back against the oppressive apartheid system. Mr. M sees acts of violence as vandalism and lawlessness. He doesn't like it at all. Tommy thinks Mr. M is out of touch with reality and the feelings of black people. Mr. M believes that education and communication are constructive alternatives to revolution. So see, when we use the Peel method, we don't necessarily just follow that way of writing it down. We incorporate what we think about. What is the point I want to make? What example can I give? How can I explain it and link it in a clever way? A good tip for you is to study previous question papers, because you can access the marking guideline as well as the paper on the internet, and then you can understand how these theme questions should be responded to. And remember, these, because they are open-ended questions, they count 3 marks, and you get 3 marks if you fully substantiate it. If you didn't explain enough, you might get 1 or 2 marks. So when you approach open-ended questions, you must realize that these are actually not difficult questions. They are easy marks. You must just think and apply Peel. But, and this is extremely important, your answers must be grounded in the text. You can't just think about your own ideas. That's not what we mean when we say it's your own opinion. It must be grounded in the text. You must be able to find answers there. Examples. That's why we say Peel, you must give examples. You have to justify your opinion, and I have explained the method now in detail. Remember that you must say, yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree. It's important to say that, otherwise your answer doesn't make sense. I have a few examples here, but we are sort of running out of time, so I'm just going to very briefly touch on that. In one of the short stories, The Last Breath, the question was, the narrator's mother is portrayed as a good mother. Discuss your view. So now you must again, can you see how we, if you look at the answers here, how we actually grounded in the text? She's more understanding of how the narrator feels about Eva. The narrator's mother serves as a peacemaker between him and his father. She asks the son to be more understanding of his father. So those are qualities of a good mother. You might find more qualities if you were to read the story. Or you're allowed to say no. She, like a husband, does not think it's a good idea for him to marry a blind girl. She does not convince her husband to be tolerant of her son's situation, or she uses her husband's cancer to blackmail the son. And that's why we say these are the easy questions, because you're allowed to give both sides of the question in order to get your marks. I want to explain to you how you must go through your literature study. You must read the genre on your own. Thorough knowledge is important. You must understand terminology used in literature study. You must master literary analysis. Karabo has spoken about all the aspects you must understand. You must think critically about it. And here I want to give you a tip for class. Divide your book clearly. If you have only one book given to you by the school, divide it so that you do all the paper 1 work in front. the paper 2, the literature in the middle, but you must separate the two genres. Otherwise, how are you going to study? There must be a clear separation of that. And then paper 3 you do at the back. Hopefully you have more than one book, but if you only have one book, you can still divide the book. And every day when you work, date your work so that there's a progress. You can see when did we do what, and you can follow. And then a last tip is that you must summarize each genre from day one. You must make the genre your own by reading it, by listening to your teacher, not just by answering questions, but really understanding it. So what must be in your summary? Take a folio page and write down the following headings, and then you keep it up during the year. First of all, the title, because you must understand what is the title and what does it mean in the book or the short story. Vocabulary, do you see the exclamation marks? You must, every new word that you don't understand, write it down, look up the word and learn new words. Because you must be brave and courageous, like Karabo said, to embrace new knowledge. You must write about the background and the setting, because you will be asked questions on those. You must write down the characters and compare and contrast the characters, because you're going to be asked those questions. So if you do it right through the year, can you see how easy it will be to study at the end of the year? Because when you pick it up that there's a difference between one character, you write it down. You must know from which point of view is it written, the narrator. You must understand the language and style. You must write down the structure and the plot development and the themes. We've spoken about the themes, extremely important that you understand all the themes. And lastly, the figures of speech must be listed. Now, just the last thing that I want to share with you, I know that lots of you ask, why on earth must we do literature? We don't even like reading. Because studying literature is like looking at the mirror of life, where man's experiences, his innermost feelings and thoughts are reflected. Through literature, we learn the culture of people across time and space. In our country, where we have diverse cultures and lots of strife, it's important that we learn about other people. We understand not only the past life of a nation, but also the present. And moreover, we become familiar not only with the culture of neighboring countries, but with that of others living very far from us. Literature is the art of discovering something extraordinary about ordinary people and saying with ordinary words something extraordinary. Goodbye, ladies and gentlemen.